Welcome to Wish I'd Known the podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show we have
Michelle Park Lazette.
Yes, we do. It was really good. It was really
Yes, it
good.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she talks about building buzz for your book,
Mm-hmm.
starting a newsletter and finding ARC readers, all those things we need. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's a debut author, and she talks to us about what she did and, kind of how she's finding readers right now. And also we talked some about analytics and how she's using that for book promotion.
Yeah.
So lots of good stuff
Really
coming up in that.
interesting. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then we want to give our May Pod Pal shout out to the Two Authors podcast.
Yes.
Nick
Yeah.
and
Doug.
Really love them. They're just the best guys, and their podcast is so good. We really enjoy it. And this week they had Robin Harding on, and it was really good.
Yeah, she talked about psychological thrillers, and she's a former screenwriter, and talked about plotting, and
they're just hilarious. So it's always
worth a listen.
These are a good time, is what I say.
Yes. Yes.
And we have supporters, right?
Yes, we do. We have two new supporters. We have Julia Thomas, and she chose the heart emoji.
Thank you.
I believe it's pronounced Laureen or Lauren Papa Bartusio. Hopefully I pronounced that close or got sort of close. If not, I apologize.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. And she chose the fire.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for supporting. And don't forget to go check out the supporter episodes. There's about 20 of those. If you become a supporter, you get those. We have a companion episode to the one that came out last week with Amy Robinson about writing conflict and emotion and gaining inspiration from dramas and television shows. Yep, K-dramas. And then the other one the most recent one we did was More Truth About Book Marketing, 5 More Publishing Myths. So those are all in there, and you can support us on wishidknowforwriters.com/support, or you can find us on Substack. So we're always happy to see new supporters coming in. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you guys. We appreciate it so much. It tells us that you love us, and we love you guys. So thanks. We appreciate it. So what's been going on with you, Sarah?
Well, I'm recording this inside a little podcast booth in a hotel lobby. I'm in Denver, and my husband's doing some training here, so I came to see him for a couple of days. I'm recording this on what day is it? We're recording on May 6th, and it started snowing last night. Big, humongous flakes. It was supposed to snow, it was supposed to be cold, and I was all excited it was going to be cold. I wore my long sleeves and layers and warm clothes, and huge snow last night, all through the night, and it's still snowing today. So I'm loving it, and because I don't get this very often, but it's supposed to clear up, and then we'll probably go do some stuff. So, but anyway, so yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm here. I'm trying to get some work done, but hotel internet is not the best for work, but I can do writing. I dictated, I think, 3 different sessions because I thought at least if I have the dictation, I can go through and I can edit them. I can do that Wi-Fi or no Wi-Fi. So, yeah. Oh, also listening to some of the replays from the Create Summit that we did with Monica. There's some really good ones. Monica did one on what do we create now that creation is infinite? Like how to think about creation in this new publishing atmosphere. It was really good. She looked back at the past and things that had happened in the past, and then gave ideas for how to handle all the changes, which I thought was right on point. Yeah. So doing some of that.
Right. Can people still get that? Yeah.
And I'll put a link in the show notes. So that'll be in the show notes too.
Okay. And then we should also mention that InkersCon is open. And we both have links. Mine's Jamie 26.
Use yours.
Okay, we'll just use mine this week. Jamie 26, so it's InkersCon, and then when you go to check out, just put in Jamie, and it's all capitals, JAMI 26.
InkersCon is always excellent. They always have great speakers.
Always.
Every time I've done anything with them, I've always been so impressed with just the way they run their conferences and events. So this one's all online. And it's great.
I mean, we missed the in-person one.
I know.
Mostly because it was, not mostly, but one of the reasons because it was in Dallas and it was easy for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I get it. I get it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, what have you got going on this week?
Oh, nothing at all.
Just minor panic and putting out fires everywhere.
I'm just getting this book ready. I really am ready. I wanted to do forced edges for the paperback and sat down yesterday to do it and went, I have no idea what I am doing. Not one clue. And one of the benefits of doing this podcast and being in this business for a while is we know a bunch of people. So I texted Remy Flagg, who's been on the podcast, and he's a cover artist. He has a service called Cover Villain, and it is a really cool it's really for authors who can't really afford a to pay for a professional cover. So he kind of helps you come up with ways to do your covers, and it's really a great service. But anyway, he helped me with my forced edges, and so when we get off this call, I'm gonna finish that, and then I'm pretty much done. I did just realize I need to come up with some book club questions to go in the back of the book, and I'm gonna do that, and then a couple of my family members are sending in some, stories about Joni or things like that I'm putting in the back of the book. Well, it's the story
The
behind the story
bonus.
kind of thing, and it's my reader magnet at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really, in this genre, they don't do that as much, but I thought this
Oh
would be,
yeah. I
a,
think people will be interested.
yeah.
Your forced edges,
Mm.
what do they look like?
I did a gradiated, so I asked my cover artist to give me the colors,
Mm-hmm.
and then I asked her if I was going to do a gradiated. Is that the word?
Radiation? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
Transition,
we're
one that
ombre,
transitions from
but
one to the other.
ombre. Cat Johnson said ombre. So yeah, if
Oh.
I was going to do that, what colors would work best? And she sent a list of colors to me, and Remy helped me put them together. We ended up kind of switching it up a little bit just because of some of the last few colors were a little muted, so we just went with three colors, but it
Mhm.
looks really good, and I'm excited about it, and I'm gonna do colored interior on Amazon. It is more
Mhm.
expensive. I When that book price came up, I went, whoa, but I think that I think it's a better reader experience. And if I
Mhm.
didn't do the colored, I would have to create a separate file
Mhm.
because I don't want it to be black and white. I just don't want a big black border around
Yeah. Yeah.
the book. So, yeah, I'm going to try that and see how it works and see, Kat Johnson has really worked a lot with this, and she has found a thicker border helps with Amazon because Amazon is not always as precise as they should be when cutting their books.
Right.
And so Ingram is much better, but a lot of people will just order from Amazon. So
Oh, I can't wait to see it.
I'm gonna get that up today, and then hopefully in a day or so, however long it takes to go for Ingram, I can get a proof and
Hmm.
see it and then have them. Yeah, we should probably get on with the interview because it's really great. And
Yeah.
I'm sure people are sick of hearing me go on about this.
All right. Well, here is Michelle. We are really excited to have Michelle Lazette here. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I am very good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Michelle writes about hidden magic, impossible choices, and what survives when the world doesn't. She independently published her debut novel, The Descended, shepherding it from messy draft to finished paperback, ebook, and audio, fueled by stubbornness, spreadsheets, and a mild caffeine dependency. We understand that. She lives in Northeast Ohio, where she is either plotting, writing, or convincing people that the end of the world is surprisingly hopeful.
Ah, well, that's good to know right now.
Is it
That's
not?
encouraging. Well, tell us how you got into writing.
The independent press that I started
Mhm.
is a good place for me to begin telling that story because it harkens back to fifth grade in Northeast Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
I was challenged alongside my fifth grade peers to write and illustrate a picture book.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up winning the contest with a title, Licky the Flying Snake.
Mm.
And so, as I was deciding in early 2025 that my journey for this novel would not be traditional publishing and instead would be my own independent press, I was, weighing options for titles for that LLC and for that press. And I just thought to myself, a lot of the content that I really dig and that thus I create is dark.
Mhm. Yeah.
And flying snakes sound dark. And they
Yeah.
also relate to where it all began for me, which was a childhood where creativity and belief in oneself was very much rooted in my sister and me by our mother.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a great story. I love that.
Thank you.
I do too. The stories behind the choices people make for their names and their pen names and publishing company names are always interesting.
Mm.
And
So,
one thing that has been on my mind recently as more and more people ask me, where did you get this idea for this novel and these scenes that they want to ask about is the dominoes
Mm.
that fall into one
Yes.
another as you're writing a long form piece of fiction, changing what it is that it becomes, right? So,
mhm.
like during
Yep.
the years that I wrote The Descended, toward the end of it, I ended up having our third baby and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing preeclampsia with that baby. And I was fortunate that I was far along in my pregnancy when high blood pressures came to challenge us.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up writing preeclampsia into a very small phrase of the novel. But it is very interesting that sometimes I think, at least I speak for myself, I feel like, oh, I should have already gotten this out to beta readers and I need to hurry up and get another book out so that, that prophecy that people share that, the best
Mm-hmm.
way to sell your first book is to write a second book can
Sure.
happen.
Sure.
But then I'm reminded that like life sprinkles little details and little experiences that make more magic if you're listening and if you let it.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's what
Mhm.
I'm telling myself.
I'm so jealous of the people who can write fast and still get those sprinkles of magic because, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm almost a year into this book. It will be done tomorrow, I believe. Yes, I know. I'm so excited. But I mean, I'm still like 2 nights ago, I was like, oh, yeah, like that is something that would make this book so much better. And it wasn't a big thing, it was a sprinkle of hopefully magic. But yeah, I mean, so it takes me a while for those things to maturize, is that the word? And germinate. So the people that can do it fast, my hats are off to them for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, that is true. So,
Yeah.
and when things happen in your life like that, it's interesting that you were able to incorporate that into your story,
Mhm.
and it's a firsthand experience. So that's, different than if you just researched it.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, what do you wish you'd known about writing and craft?
So,
Yes.
what do I wish I would have known about writing and craft in particular? So, we're not talking about marketing here. I
Not
would
yet.
say, not yet. I would say the thing that well, two things. So, one, I'm a professional writer. It is what I do. It
Mhm.
is what I've done since I graduated with a newspaper journalism degree in December 2005. So, so my gosh, 21-ish years
Mhm.
of being a writer for organizations or newsrooms. And I'd say what I wish I would have known is that I still, with, decades of experience writing under my belt, had a lot to learn about fiction. And that's
Mhm.
why when I see other journalists or technical writers or people who spend their time writing in their professions say, I'm going to write a book, my first instinct is to share with them there's still a lot to learn about the
Yeah.
craft of novel and fiction writing.
Right.
One example I remember learning early on. So I was listening to another podcast, and the host shared that, fiction writers, dependent on POV and, the stylistic choices you're making, need to avoid head hopping. And I was like, what's that?
Yeah.
And lo and
Sounds bad,
behold,
doesn't it?
Michelle didn't know, and Michelle was definitely committing some head hopping crimes in
Yes.
her manuscript.
Yes.
And so, head hopping, for anyone listening and curious, is, this idea that if I'm in my POV female character's mind and in her vantage point in a scene,
Mm-hmm.
she can't, unless she can read minds, she should not be able to easily decipher someone else's intentions, motivations, ulterior motives, because she's
Right.
not in his mind. And
Yeah.
so that had to be fixed throughout my manuscript. And so I will say that is something, those are the lessons that I think I am glad that I learned.
Yes.
And that is, do not allow your full-time career to mislead you, that there isn't work to be done in learning the craft,
Right.
in buying the books, and listening to the podcasts. And I will say, shout out to podcasts. That is definitely a way that, while working out, while cutting vegetables, while
Yeah.
commuting into work, I was able to level up what I know about the industry I was trying to break into, and about the craft that I have desperately tried to do
Yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any problems, or was it difficult for you to go from more analytical writing to emotion and showing like the depth of the character's emotions?
Yeah, it's like I I don't know if this is so corny, but I got goosebumps when you asked me that, because the way of a journalist, and Audrey Kelly, who is the POV, one of the point of view characters in my novel, is a journalist. That is
Mhm.
not a mistake. And so one of the things that I think I do well, and that I've been complimented about, and that as I've thought about it, I figure has roots within journalism, is dialogue. Because I was only ever allowed to interview people and write precisely what they said, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't have a problem knowing that I wouldn't say, but Jamie, did you put chocolate chips in the cookie dough?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Michelle, I didn't. I just saw
Yeah.
something in someone's email, I think, that reminded folks, like, people do not always repeat each other's names. So watch for that issue in dialogue. But I will say, again, during the writing of my manuscript, it was a podcast that I was listening to that I feel imparted to me this concept that readers do not read books and don't stick with books because of plot alone. They want to see people struggle,
Yeah.
people change, people experience joy and disappointment, and all the things that we all experience ourselves. And so
Yeah.
I had a lot of work to do on interiority. I definitely did, because that was not part of journalistic writing, really.
Yeah.
I can think of some examples where you would use it, but you're not allowed to infer those things. So I was allowed in fiction to go, I'm going to make stuff up, which you
Yeah.
don't do as a journalist. And I'm inside of people's heads. And I remember very distinctly taking it seriously, that I needed to do a better job with interiority, when two popular podcast hosts said during an episode, interiority is really the level up that novels offer.
Yeah.
Right? You
Mhm.
cannot get that kind of mind reading, that kind of like dialogue tag that's only the dialogue tag that fits Jamie or Sarah or Michelle in movies or documentaries. It's, you're inside of someone's head in a novel. And so I knew I had to lean into that. And I did a lot of work to try to do that in a way that was expansive, but not too much, that it slowed things down, and that it felt like too on the nose. So it's all challenging.
It's all a challenge, all of it. Well, speaking of challenges, what do you wish you'd known about marketing?
Well, so the irony here is that is what I do for a living now. So I went from a journalist to an in-house storyteller to a marketing strategist. So my job is to market events that can draw up to 600 people, to send emails to subscriber lists of 2,500 plus, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is compared to my author email list, let me tell you. So unfortunately. And that's something that I will say. So what do I wish I would have known? I wish I would have known what a slog it is, and that there is no silver bullet that just allows you to let it sit and sell. Like, I wish there was. About the best I can think that kind of fits that is when I drop off books on consignment to the indie bookstores, and then they call me a month later to say I've sold out. That feels like a let it and set it. But everything else, social is an enduring need to do, and very difficult really to identify from one day to the next whether something successfully converted into a sale. And I say that because I feel badly for the creators. Like, I just put on some Korean face moisturizer that I bought after I saw someone's TikTok. But did I buy it from the link that she put in her TikTok? I didn't. I apologize, creator. So that person has no idea that I purchased the very product she was selling because of her TikTok.
Right.
Because I didn't follow the rules. But like, most of us don't follow the rules or know the rules. And so that's something that I think I'm going round and round about to say it is a slog. There's no easy way to keep selling books. It truly is, just you have to stay pounding the pavement. And so that gets me to the thing that I'm very glad I tried my best to ensure, which is that the book that I wrote and published is as dang good as I could get it to be, and as I could get the cover design to be. And I didn't do it myself. I had a cover designer out of Barcelona, and I had an audiobook producer out of Chicago. But, when you have to consistently be showing up and telling people to give your book a chance, you have to have a confidence that doesn't waver. And I think making sure you put the work and the time, and when you got those last edits and your editor said, I don't think the end is working, and you're months away from launch and you just want to say, I don't care. I'm not doing it. You dig deep and you ask yourself, you give yourself a little bit of time, and then you ask yourself, is she right? When you admit to yourself begrudgingly that she's right, you do the work and then you send it back to her. And I think that is how I stay confident, even with 1 and 2 star reviews here and there. We all have them. My least favorite 1-star review was for a different nonfiction book that I wrote, where someone reviewed it as a 1 star, or maybe it was a 3-star because its cover was smudged. I was like, it has nothing to do with it.
There's things like that happen, but you're right. You just have to keep going. I feel like you need a lot of fishing lines out with marketing. You've got to have a lot of things going on because you don't know actually what's going to work and what's not going to work.
No.
So, yeah. No. Well, what are you glad you know now?
I am glad that in the months leading up to publishing and marketing my own novel, I learned some Google Analytics. And so I learned how to create, so I'm going to try to say this in a way that if my 10-year-old was sitting with me here, he would get it. So there are ways to use links to one's own website and to put tracking suffixes on those links so that they tell you where traffic originated from. And so, for example, I used to write, because my husband is amazing, at a local bed and breakfast, and it has 4 rooms, and it's in this historic mansion. And if you read the novel, you'll probably glean that I have an adoration for historic architecture. And so I would stay there and I would work on this craft. And so I decided that I wanted to put 4 of my books into the 4 rooms of that B&B with a bookmark with a QR code. that encourage people to come on and read the book that was written where you're staying this weekend.
Yeah.
And I use the tracking link, and I can see that they are taking me up on that and following that link to see my website. And so I think I'm glad that I learned how to do a little bit of analytics, and anyone can. I know that it can, Google Analytics still intimidates me, but there are resources that are free online, and creating tracking links is free. So anybody can do it. Google Analytics is also free. I think probably the cost comes in when you talk about owning your own website, right? So you have to pay for the domain and some other things. But what I like about that is it enables me to see some answers to my ever loving question, which is what of any of this that I'm doing is making a difference? Is spreading awareness that this book exists, is, piquing curiosity in an apocalyptic book that has something to do with lasagna too. And so I can see and share that the bookmarks aren't driving like a ton of traffic. What drives a lot of traffic is organic or search engines. So if you are optimizing your website for search engines and for artificial intelligence search, good on you. It's probably a good idea. That's the working smarter, not harder sort of tip I'd give. I can also see that social media drives a decent amount of traffic to my site. That has something to do with a miserably unsuccessful advertising campaign I ran with Meta, which I guess it wasn't unsuccessful in that it did drive traffic, but I don't know that I can trace any book purchases to that traffic. So what am I glad I learned? How to do some analytics to see which spaghetti is sticking to the wall and which is not. And I'm also glad that I learned that audiobooks can outsell paperbacks. And that has been my experience. And I wouldn't have had an audiobook. One of the questions that I think you both shared was, what's some of the most unhelpful advice you've received? And it has happened for me a couple times at author or bookie events where, I shared that I had an audiobook and they would ask, well, did you do it yourself? And I said, no. And the reason I initially was going to attempt it, but then talked to a mentor of mine out of Atlanta who said, I'm doing it. And I worked in this sort of engineering, artistic creativity career for years. And he mentioned he has to make sure that the clothing hangs in the exact same way in the closet in which he's recording, and that he has a mic, and that he is listening to what he recorded yesterday to ensure the inflection more or less seems, cohesive and consistent. And then he mentioned, I also have to go back in and edit the pops of the buzz and the puzz. And I was just like, no, this is it. I can try to do this as well as possible. And I don't think I'm going to succeed as well as someone I sourced through ACX Audible. So getting back to the most unhelpful advice that I have ever received, I think it was when people have found out that I did a royalty share, which means I paid nothing up front for an audiobook producer to audition to record my book, to record the book, to make sure that I was happy with it, and then to execute on all of the file sizes and whatnot that you need to get onto Audible. Responses to that have been, I would never do that. I would never let an audiobook producer have 40%. Because it's 40% to her, 40% to me, 20% to ACX Audible through the royalty share. But my response to that is something of those sales is more than nothing of no sales. And so, I think for me, it was worth it to take certain risks. And she produced an audiobook I could never have sniffed to produce. Yeah.
There's also your time involved in learning all that. Like if you're going to do that, there's a lot of time invested. If you're going to do it yourself, there's even more. And there's something to be said for outsourcing parts of things. You're not going to make as much money on the sales as if you did it yourself.
Right.
But like you said, you're seeing some profit, some sales, and a new type of reader, probably listener, that you wouldn't have had probably. Yeah. So you got to choose your battles with it, where you're going to invest your time.
Yeah, so we like to have newer authors on because we want to know, because we started years and years ago. And so you put out your first book in September, correct?
That's correct.
How did you get your first 10 to 15 email subscribers?
I think it was family and friends. Once it was in polished form, I uploaded the first 3 chapters of the novel, The Descendant, and using a platform that I'm sure you all have covered called BookFunnel, made sort of like a reader magnet or a lead magnet.
Yeah.
And so in exchange for people giving me their email address and joining my newsletter list, they received the first 3 chapters of the book. So that is how I did it. I do recommend that people have a subscribe or call to subscribe on almost probably the footer of your website, so that it's there no matter what page people are perusing. I think that that's a general best practice today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very good. Very good. Yeah. I did that. And then I got involved in a newsletter promo for previews. So we all were giving away a few chapters in exchange.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, is that like, so you both recently had Evan from Story Origin, and he was talking about how there are pages of like collaborative. Yeah.
And it's like that on BookFunnel too. There are promos on BookFunnel as well. So
where you can
get involved. Yeah. Or create your own. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your cover artist a little while ago. So tell us how you found your cover artist and your editor.
I did use Reedsy, and I found that to be, I mean, the design brief that they required was just like, ew, I don't want to do this. Because, once you get to the end of writing a novel, you're just, I don't know about you two, I'm sick of it. I don't want to read it for another like 4 years. I don't want to write a synopsis. I don't ever want to write a query letter for that thing again. And when you ask me to pull together a design brief that asks about like important symbols in the book or colors and tonal, questions, and I was just so sick of the book. And I mean, I think that means that I spent enough time with it. But so I found Cover Kitchen, all one word, through Reedsy. They're out of Barcelona. And I intend, as long as everything works out, to hire them again. It was a positive experience. They had created hand drawn, the font on the front cover of The Descendant is hand drawn. So parts of it have that. There are creatures in the book that have horns, like a mass of horns on their heads. And so I loved how they used hand drawing to affect a certain look out of the title of the book. But they were great. They hand drew an entirely different cover. And I was so worried to give them the feedback that I didn't think it worked, because they hand drew it. And I was just feeling a little guilty. And you know how it is. Sometimes, someone put work into something for you. And I don't like to, tell someone I didn't like it. But the thing that I kept in my mind is what Thomas Umstattd Jr. out of the Novel Marketing Podcast says almost all the time. And that is, your cover is not for you. It's for your readers. And so I put 2 different covers, including the hand-drawn one, to a test on social media. And I asked people, which would you be most likely to pick up? And I selected the one that they said they would be most likely to pick up. That said, a pro tip I have for folks out there attempting to do what we all have done is, you do really need to consider how well your cover will translate in thumbnail size. Because if I'm honest, I don't think that my cover, I think it's pretty and attention grabbing in person. And I think that my sales at bookstores is some evidence of that. But in thumbnail size, I think it's super dark. And I probably should have been more thoughtful on that front.
Yeah. Another tip is make it really, really small and then put it in grayscale. and see how it looks, because people who have Kindles that don't have color, sometimes the shades are so close that it's hard to read. So that's something that is a good tip to try when you're looking at covers. But yeah, a lot of times when I look at my covers, I'll think, well, it's not, there's another version of this that I love better, but this matches with the genre and it will get the job done, and it's what the readers want. So that's really important to figure out. So,
what part of creating a book? So it's a two-part question. What part of creating a book and what part of marketing a book is your least favorite?
For me, the creating the book is the first draft. It's a love-hate relationship. I'll get an idea and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then the actual slog of writing is hard for me. Yeah. What about you, Jamie?
I don't mind a first draft as much as you, but it's that second draft, because my first drafts are just trash. I mean, they're just a dirty, dirty draft. And so the second draft is really when I'm writing the book. And it's so hard, because you have to take what you've already written and figure out if you want to keep it or get rid of it. I think it's why it takes me so long to write a book. But yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And for marketing, I like most of marketing. There's not really just a whole lot. I mean, sitting down to write a newsletter whatever you're going to do, that's like the homework part of it. But I don't mind a newsletter. I mean, it's just, it's that whole homework thing. Anything that feels like homework, I don't want to do it. And that's just the rebel in me. So,
yeah.
But yeah, what about you, Sarah?
For marketing, I do enjoy it when I get going on it. I feel like there's so many different things that we should be doing, that the conventional wisdom is you should do all these different things, that when I start trying to do them all, it gets to be too much. And I don't like that feeling that I haven't done the things that need to be done or should be done.
Yeah.
But then I have to remember that some of those things don't work well for my readers. It's like, it's getting that balance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, back to your cover, I looked at it just a minute ago when we were talking, and first of all, I love it. I mean, it's beautiful, but it is dark in the thumbnail. But the good part is your title is very clear in the thumbnail. So I don't think it works against you that badly. I don't. The thing being dark, because the title does work.
If you can read the title, that's great.
This is really unsolicited advice, but I'm gonna give it to you anyway. Make your name bigger next time, or just have them go back in and make your name bigger. Your name should just be bigger. You're the author.
Isn't that like the tug of war of authors right
For
now?
me, it's not at all. Put my name on there and make it big. That's that is like, I wrote that damn thing. I want my name on it.
I'm proud of that.
That's right. So anyway, that's my bit of unsolicited advice. Make your name bigger.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'll take more of it.
Well, tell us about, now you use Book Siren to find your ARC readers. Is that correct?
In part. So I had hired marketing assistants in the fantastic form of Kate from Ripped Pages LLC, who works with authors across geographies. And she has, I don't want to misspeak, but it felt like she had a perennial street team that was prepared to assist. Well, let's be real. So ARC readers don't ARC read, I don't think, to assist authors as much as they do to dive into new story realms, right?
Sure.
So, and I do not begrudge them that. I'm like,
it's a win-win. Yeah.
It's like, get this for free and then help me not look like I have 0 stars and 0 reviews on launch day. Thank you so much. So I did so she helped me in posting to platforms such as Instagram and Facebook to, recruit people she knew. But
Mhm.
then a lot of my reviewers did come through Book Sirens, which is a platform that I used. I guess the way that I recall it is you pay like $10 for a book to
Mhm.
be on the platform. And then
Mhm.
I think you pay $1 or $2 per reader who actually downloads and agrees to the committed time period for reading and reviewing.
Mhm. Yeah.
What I did find, and I don't know if either of you used Book Sirens?
Mm-mm.
I have
No.
not. No. Mm-mm.
Okay. What I will say was, okay. What I have less of an appetite for is paying someone to help me give my book that I wrote for 5 years away so that I can get ratings and reviews. I'm not the biggest fan of that. However, Book Sirens did pay off in that a large percentage, I think it was closing in on 60 to 70%, I think, of the folks to whom, they sent it
Mhm.
did rate and did review, which I
Mhm.
was happy with.
Yeah.
And then also, I didn't have to send any reminders. They
Yeah.
handled all of that.
That's really great. Yeah, that is great. You see, and with my first, I think I gave away 300 copies of the book with a program called Shifted Sheets. I don't think they're around anymore, but excuse me, but it was totally worth it because I
Mhm.
by the end of the first day or couple of days, I had 75 reviews. Can't beat that on a first book. It was, and they were good reviews, like not star rating, not like just,
They weren't like all 5-star. They were.
no, they weren't, but they were well written and
Mhm.
they were interesting and they weren't just like book reports, which I hate. Hate.
Or those that
Yes.
are like, loved it. And
Yeah.
that's all you get.
Yeah.
That's not real helpful for another
Yeah.
reader.
But what was the name of the company that you used for like the Instagram and stuff, did you say?
Yeah. So it's what my children should never again do, which is rip pages.
Oh, that's
So
right.
it's RIPPED
Uh-huh.
Pages LLC. And Kate, she offers different tiers of marketing assistance. So, right, I would review what videos and reels and photo carousels that she'd put together. I'd review the captions and then she would go in and post for me so that,
Mm.
I could kind of see it happening Monday, Wednesday, and Friday or whatever days we picked,
Yeah.
but, be able to do the other work. So
Mhm. Yeah.
she's been very great, attentive to detail.
Yeah.
And the thing that I will say is it resonated with me. One of the most recent episodes you recorded and posted about like this idea that you should be everywhere.
Mhm.
And it's tempting to do that, but it's also exhausting. And so I wanted to share I wanted to ask you both what you feel your obscure wins are, but then also share something that a traditionally published author told me to do that I feel has worked and that I will be leaning into this summer. And that is, how like there are book events and book cons,
Yeah.
and that's probably our first thought about, oh, that's what I should
Mhm.
participate in.
Right.
I, upon receiving this advice from this other author, shout out Katie Evans, her book Broccoli is Trying to Kill Me is out now. I I tried. So she said, try tangentially related events. So she has
Mm.
a middle grade series out and it involves animals. So she would do some animal related events. So in the little town where I live, it's actually not that little, they have a spooky pooch parade. And as you
Mhm.
mentioned, I published in September and my book is dark. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to try this. My family did not admit this to me before I went to said event, set up my tent, and put my red balloons out and
Yeah, yeah.
attempted to sell. But they told me later, we all wondered why you were going to a spooky pooch parade, but it was one of the more profitable things I've done. A
Yeah.
low entry fee to participate, and I
Right.
was the only author and the only book there. So
Mhm.
this summer, I'm leaning into that by going to farmers markets.
Mm.
And setting up out of my trunk or with my table and hopefully being one of the only people there selling to people a story. And, maybe buy your beets, buy your cauliflower, buy your raw honey, if that's your thing. And then if
grab a
apocalypse.
book on the way to the car. Yeah, exactly.
So that's one of the things that I'm leaning into to see if it works. What I've been surprised by, to be honest, is bookstore sightings are not as, and you know what, maybe I shouldn't be surprised. It's not like I'm, Sarah J. Maas, but I thought that those would be easier wins.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I would count a lot of that to be the easiest win. But I'm interested in what your response is. Like if I asked you, what's the thing that you did that you were like, this is probably not going to work, but it did?
I think for me, the easiest thing I do, the one that I stress about the least, is the Mystery Books podcast. And it kind of runs in the background. I don't do a whole lot for it. Connects with people. It gets recommended through recommendation engines, and it has SEO there built in, because you have your show notes and things. Probably would do better if I did a transcript with each one. But I feel like that's just low maintenance, and I don't do a whole lot for it. But it's pretty easy for me now that I have it set up and it's going. So I think that's the one that I don't really have to stress about.
Yeah.
And it seems to it gets downloaded every day. Some episode gets downloaded every day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's
what about
great.
you, Jamie?
Well, I haven't done anything in a while, but so I guess I'll give you two things. One that I did, I will say giving away those 300 copies of that book was the best thing I ever did. Best thing I ever did. And building my newsletter before the book came out. Those things. But those are like building your newsletter is not easy. That takes work. And then the second thing is, I think newsletter swaps, like I set those up before that first book came out. Like literally the book came out I think it came out on a Tuesday. And on Sunday, I was like, oh, I was going to do that. And so I'm like panic messaging people, that I had met through different groups that I was in, and setting those up have really made a difference. I have heard recently that newsletter swaps do not work as well anymore. I don't know. I haven't done one in a while, but I have a book bub next week and I have several newsletter swaps set up. So we will see. I've never had a book bub, so this is, just sort of
uncharted territory.
Stuff, yes. And so I'm going to try the newsletter swap thing and see if it works, and it may not. I mean, again, I've heard from some people that it's not working as well as it used to, but I kind of have a hard time believing that, because especially if it's somebody you've never swapped with before, because readers are always looking for new books to read. They're looking for new authors to love. And especially the readers we have, which they read so much and they read so fast, and they're always, they run out of things. So anyway, we'll see what happens. But those things, I think, were the things that were the easiest and that paid off the most, especially in the beginning. Yeah.
I think with newsletter swaps, it would be interesting, the people that say that they're not working, to ask how often they do them. Because if you've done, 10 in the last couple of months, and if you're swapping with readers that are very similar to you, those readers may have already seen your book in somebody else's newsletter. So maybe wait a little bit, and then do another phase later, and see how the downloads go.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. What do you think the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success has been?
I think it is investing in, without money, investing in feedback and revisions. And so I'll just share, I'm not sure how many folks do this. Someone else does, because I learned that there's a term for it, and that's called alpha reader and then beta reader. Beta readers are the more ubiquitous term, I think. And then I do alphas. So what I do is, if I consider that a novel is pretty well finished at 80,000 words, I'll stop about halfway through, even if I write out of order, which I do. I know I'm a monster. And I ask people I know who purport to read the genre if they would please read and then answer a confidential survey, which I create through SurveyMonkey for free. And then I ask them if they would like to voluntarily participate in follow-up questions with me. And in those conversations, my focus is, what did you love? What did you lack? What did you long for? What did you learn? And, the things that I'm looking to hear, I always express to them is what's not working. Like, I would rather hear it through an alpha reader and then later through a beta reader phase than through reviews on Amazon. So then I'm at the phase right now where I'm actually seeking beta readers because I'm about done. I'm about at like 70,000 words. And I tend to not want to go all the way to 80,000 for a beta read because I want to leave room for the beta readers to say, I really needed more rich setting, or I really needed you to flesh out the relationship between Lacey and Ledge more, or, whatever it might be. And I don't want to get to a point where I've written to 85,000 words and then have this like reticence to do wholesale changes and to cut scenes. So that's why I tell alpha and beta readers, do not line edit. Don't do it. Because some of this is not going to exist in the full manuscript when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think, really serves me, but more importantly, serves my readers. And I'll share with you something that I repeat too often in my office setting, which is a woman was at a marketing conference that I religiously attend, and she challenged those in the room, who included everyone from like entrepreneurs like us to marketers like me. And she said, I want you to imagine that your sole role is to sell socks. And she said, and it's really, really critical that you start with the awareness that no one wants your socks. They want and need their feet to be warm. And that has just continued to govern the way that I market my book, the way that I write my books. It's never me writing a bookstore and saying, hey, I want to have a signing of this apocalyptic fantasy book in your children's bookstore, right? Like, you have to pay attention to those little things, but even the ways that you make asks of people with whom you want to work, and you say, would this be of interest or would this be of service to your usual clientele, shows that you're thinking about how can this be a win-win for you bookstore, or you book influencer, or you, I'm trying to find a caterer of lasagna to do a literary lasagna affair this year. And so I'm trying to say, like, I want more people to know about your lasagna and my book. So let's work together.
So let's team up and work.
Because it is a lot about that vibe marketing too. Like, what are the feelings we're giving our readers? What are the feelings they want, and are we offering that and then delivering on that? That's really, I think, important. So that's great. Well, thanks for being here. This has been fantastic. So fun.
It has been my pleasure.
Tell everybody where they can find your books and find you online.
Oh, I would love to. So if you are an audiobook or ebook reader, you can go to Amazon. And if you're in the Northeast Ohio area, the book is on shelves at places like the Viridian bookstore in Willoughby, and Flame and Fable in Lakewood, and Parallel Universe in Cleveland. There's also my website. Again, we're kind of framing the conversation coming back to Flying Snakes. At flyingsnakepress.com, you can purchase signed copies, and you can also do that thing and join my newsletter and be like my 64th subscriber, because that has been a mountainous challenge for me, is growing that list.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes time. We totally understand.
It does. Well,
thank you so much for being here. And we will have all those links in the show notes, and those will be at wishidknowforwriters.com. And don't forget to check out the Two Authors podcast this week as well. and we will see everybody next week.